Welcome to another episode of Roll Up a Pull Up. So get your blunts rolled and your drink poured. All right, look. So for this one, I'm gonna be telling y'all about leaving the streets behind. Why you leave the streets behind, Mr. Roll Up? Because the streets left me behind. All right, let's go. So this how this go, right? Growing up my whole life, I always been in the streets since I was 5 years old. No lie. I always been in the streets since I was a kid. You know what I'm saying? I was just raised like that. My daddy was a OG. My daddy was a part of the YBI boys, Young Boys Incorporated. I'm pretty sure y'all heard of them. They was way before BMF and all of that shit. That's where BMF came from. They was inspired by them. Now I'm not saying that, they followed their footsteps or none of that, but before it was BMF, it was YBI. And that's where my daddy came from. So he wanted his son to grow up as a gangster just like him. So I've been in the streets since I was a kid. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, growing up, I took this street shit serious. You know what I'm saying? And just so happened, I was in the hood full of a bunch of guys that was growing up on the same tip. So we all was on the same thing at the same time. You know what I'm saying? And I was in the streets 100 every day, all day. I never learned how to cook or none of that shit. I had to learn how to cook when I became grown. You know what I'm saying? You know how kids learn how to cook when they kids because they moms put them in the kitchen and teach them shit. When my mom's, when I be walking out the door to go outside, my mom's be like, "Hey, come in here, watch this. Let me teach you how to cook." I be like, "Nah, I'm outside." You know what I'm saying? So I missed that time. I was outside more than I was inside. You know what I'm saying? I didn't breathe so much outside air. Maybe that's why I'm so healthy. I was never in the house. I was always outside in the streets, growing up my whole life. East side, west side, whatever. I was out here. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, with me growing up in the streets, doing street shit, claiming the hood, banging my block, repping my set, you know what I'm saying? I was just deeply involved in this shit. Then as I got older, I started going to jail. Now, when I started going to jail, that's when I started realizing the streets didn't have the love for me that I thought it did. The same love that I had it didn't have that same love in return. What you mean by that, Mr. Roll Up? When I got locked up, the streets ain't come bail me out. Even though I was getting locked up for doing street shit, the streets never came and got me. You know what I'm saying? When I had to stand in front of that judge, the streets wasn't there to save me or none of that shit. You know what I'm saying? When I sat in that cell, the streets wasn't there to comfort me or help me out or nothing. You know what I'm saying? The streets stayed right where they was at. Also, I lost so many homeboys in the streets. If the streets really loved me, they wouldn't have took my mans and them from me. Not only that, the streets put me in front of my homeboys while they laying there on the ground dying. I had to watch my homeboys die in my face. And this was in the streets. So the streets was showing me they don't got the love for me that I got for them. But I was still hard-headed. You know what I'm saying? So it took for me to get shot the fuck up. I had to get shot up 7 times. I still ain't learned my lesson. I got shot up in the streets. You know what I'm saying? I could have been the next one laying on the ground dead. But I saved myself. It wasn't the streets that saved me. I had to save me. You know, I did that. I got away from this shit. When I should have got out the streets then, but I didn't. I still was out here every day. I got out the hospital the same day I went in. I went to the hospital about 3, 4 in the morning. I was out the hospital around 2 p.m. I was back in the streets by 3:30, 4 p.m. Like ain't nothing happened. Guess what? 7 days after that, The streets put me back in jail. The police pulled me over in the streets in the same neighborhood where I got shot at. If the streets had love for me, they wouldn't have never let them cops get on my ass. But they didn't. Because the streets ain't had no love for me. No matter what type of work I was putting in for the streets, no matter what I was claiming. The same hood that I was claiming was the same hood I got caught up in that made me go to jail and do my time. Yeah, it was my fault. I was the one that did it, but I did it for the streets. And the streets wasn't there for me when I needed them. You know what I'm saying? So even with that being said, I went off to jail to go do my time. I'm still in jail claiming the streets, 7 Mile, all of that shit, right? Around a whole bunch of other gorillas from a whole bunch of other hoods. I could have put it down then, but I didn't. I still was repping the streets. I got sent off to prison. I still was repping the streets. It took about a good year and a half, 2 years into my time before I had an old head sit me down and say, hey man, why you be going so hard for this shit? I'm like, nigga, that's where I'm from. You know what I'm saying? I've been in this shit my whole life. This is just how I came up. It is what it is. Old head like, man, look. He like, I know your daddy. You know what I'm saying? He like, take a good look. Your daddy ain't in the streets no more. I had to sit back and think about it. I was like, damn, he not. Because when it was time for me to start, growing up and shit like that, by the time I turned like 7, 8 years old, my daddy had to leave the streets alone because my mama wasn't with that shit. So my daddy had to leave it alone if he wanted to come home and be a family with my mother and me. So he had to put that shit down. He had to stop selling drugs. He had to let that shit go. And he got a real job. He became a fucking bus driver for the city. Well-known bus driver too, at that. He was done with that shit. When the old head said that, I was like, damn, my daddy did let that shit go. So that was one thing that started making my mind tick, like, maybe this street shit really ain't what I think it is. He also laid another gem on me. He said, if you die right now, is that block that you claim, is the lights gonna shut off for you? Is they gonna throw yellow tape around that block and shut that block down for you in remembrance of you? Is they gonna hold a vigil on that block for you? Is that block gonna be shut down just for you? I said, nah, man. He said, what you think that block gonna do when you dead and gone? I'm like, shit, it's gonna keep being that block. He like, there you go. He slapped his hand on the table. He got up and walked away. With them 2 gems he laid on me, that made me realize this street shit didn't love me like I loved it. So from that point on, I said, I'm done with this shit. I let the streets go. I dropped my flag, everything. I told everybody in prison I wasn't with that shit no more. I'm done with it. I already had my ranking. I had my respect. I was the second on the yard. A part of the GDs. I was the second on the yard. I was right next to the chairman, the first. You know what I'm saying? The dude that was running shit, JB. I was right next to him. I went straight to him. I'm like, I'm done with this shit. It's over with. He said, you know what, homie? That's some real shit. I respect that. So we went to all the other homies. I told them I was done with it. Everybody shake me out. I was done with it. I carried on, did the rest of my time. I started maturing, right? Okay, cool. Fast forward the tape. I get out of prison. Guess what? The streets was dead. Before I went to prison, the streets was popping. You know what I'm saying? By the time I got out, that shit was dead. It was like that was my sign letting me know that I outgrew that shit. And I was disgusted with it. Like, damn, this is what I was ready to die over. You know what I'm saying? I was real life ready to go 6 feet under for this shit. Now I go through there, that same neighborhood that I was claiming, it don't even got the same people over there no more. It's a whole new crew of people over there. And I was ready to die for that shit, for something that don't even have the same people that I came up with. I am so glad and so thankful that I came across that old head. His name was Doc. That Doc told me the streets don't love me like I love them. And I had to think about it, and it changed my way of thinking. Hopefully this reached one of y'all, told y'all something. The streets don't love you like you love them. And if you don't believe it, just think about it. Think about what I just said. Take one real long breath and think real hard about it. I guarantee you will come to the same conclusion I did. It's been another episode of Roll Up a Power Up. So get your blunts rolled and your drink poured.